electric.
Welcome back for another video. Today I'm going to be talking about Home Assistant and my journey with it. Let's get something out of the way to start with, and that's I am not an expert with Home Assistant. I don't want to talk about the technical side and all the configuration and the details because I will embarrass myself. I am a novice and I want to present what I'm doing with it as a novice because this was the start of my journey. My journey started with myself doing a video about apps and the different ones from Solis, Solaredge, Energy, Myenergi, all those different ones. And some aspects of the apps were brilliant, but others were not. And all of these companies are just providing an app and the data and don't seem to be progressing it, making it better and better every year. So my frustrations were shown in that video. One of my subscribers and followers contacted me and offered to send me a Home Assistant system, saying, why don't I try it? He'd like to see me have a go and present some of the data on YouTube, like I'm doing right now. And he's obviously an advocate of Home Assistant, but was extremely generous with both his time and sending me a blue box to try. And I can't thank him enough for doing that because it really was a catalyst to getting me going. I wasn't interested in those systems and those boxes, and it's because I've got a background in IT, but since I've retired, I've tried to walk away from Microsoft and laptops and desktops and computers and programming and all those sort of things, and I only want to use mobile phones and tablets, simple plug-and-play things. And looking at a microcomputer, whether it be a Raspberry Pi or an Arduino processor, those sort of things, scared me a little bit because it was beyond my realm of comfort, and I didn't want to get into Linux-based systems or Unix-type operating systems. I didn't want to get into any of that at all, so I was apprehensive. But I was wrong to be so, because when the blue box arrived, and here it is, there was no more to it than this tiny little box. There's no keyboard, there's no mouse, there's no screen. I didn't need anything. It's preloaded with the Home Assistant operating system. But if you're starting from scratch, then on whichever operating system you're using, all you have to do is download the Home Assistant application onto the system. So it's really not very complicated. Once I've got the Home Assistant system loaded, or for me just powered on with this blue box, all I had to do was connect to the IP address of this Home Assistant box, which is plugged directly into my BT router, and hey presto, I could then see the Home Assistant app communicating with the blue box, and it's an empty repository waiting for me to configure lots of data with it. Now these Home Assistant systems, there's lots to them, and the way I'm using it I think is only scratching the surface, but I view it as a data repository. The Home Assistant system is a blank box with a database, and what you do is configure what data you want to collect, and then once you have it collected you can display it. So these are the dashboards. This is the view that you're looking at now. I have a dashboard and I add to it different cards, different graphs, different charts, different pieces of data. But first I have to install integrations. Now integrations are like apps on a mobile phone or a tablet. Basically you download them through the equivalent of a Play Store, through Home Assistant itself or something called hacks. And those integrations are produced by third parties, interested people that are coding these over on the internet and posting them on GitHub and places like that. You can download the integration, and that provides an interface between Home Assistant and the end servers of places like Myenergi, Solaredge, Casa for smart plugs, all sorts of things like that. So wherever there's an API that you can connect to see data, Octopus Energy being another one, then often people are producing integrations to simulate that app that connects to the company's servers and extract the data. These integrations really are plug and play. You can download them quite easily. You can set up the API key as easily as installing the Octopus Energy app. So it's not something to be afraid of. It's something that I've found very, very easy once you get used to it. And there is a richness of information out there. Just about all the information I've wanted has been available so far. A couple have taken a little longer to install and find out how to work than I would like, but that comes with time. The more experience I have, the more information I find online, the easier this appears to be. So let's zoom in on my dashboard and have a look at the data that I'm displaying, and I'll explain where I get it from. The first two lines here that start with bulk 15, 51.3 and 100, that's from my battery. So these are things that I've coded from the Victron interface. These are Modbus inquiries. Now I say coded, that all sounds complicated, but really it was just cut and paste from an internet article that I saw. There really wasn't much to it, and I'll show you that in just a moment. But that first line comes from my Victron directly. This is live, being refreshed. Some of the variables are refreshed every few seconds, some are refreshed every 20 or 30 seconds. The second line, these are my power ones from Victron. They start with V, so they're all from Victron. The first one is grid power, whether it's minus and it's going out to the grid, or positive and coming from the grid. V battery power, that's the amount of power coming from the battery. Yep, I'm drawing 3 kilowatts at the moment from the battery. VPV power, that's 2.2 kilowatts, 4.3 kilowatts now of PV solar power, and AC loads, that's the amount of AC power that the Victron system is seeing and using. So I've got all my information there on the Victron and the power in the house and the grid and the battery, so I can see it in one place, and solar. So just that one line of data gives me a really good view of what's going on. Below that data, I have a line that comes from my Myenergi hot water tank, so there's an integration for that as well. It tells me I am 81% full of hot water. The cold section of the tank is at 27.5 degrees. The hot section of the tank is at 50.4 degrees. And mixed days, that's something I've created myself. It's a count telling me how many days since I've done a cleansing cycle. Now, the Myenergi app doesn't provide that, but Home Assistant makes it quite easy for me to be able to implement that myself. So I'll explain that one in perhaps a separate video about my automations. It's just a counter, but it works really easily. Below that, I have some other power information coming from the Myenergi app, so it's showing how much charging on the Zappi, how much heating on the Eddi. Aircon, I've got a Shelly sensor, a power monitor sensor, so that's another app and another integration. And it's got a CT clamp over my aircon circuit and also the oven and hob circuit, so I can see how much power we're using on all of those things. Moving down a couple of lines, I've then got some dials, and those are showing more about the solar energy and the import and export. So I've got the numbers, the total kilowatt hours for the day here. Solar today, 10.32. That's the amount of total solar power from my 3 solar inverters. It's got all of them together because this is data from the Myenergi app that sees all of my solar. It's one CT clamp over one position where all of the inverters are connected together. The Solaredge information comes from a Solaredge integration, 2.54 kilowatts. Kilowatt hours, that's from the Solaredge app itself, so just for that one array. What I don't have yet is the individual figures for the Solis inverters that I have. That's an integration that I've yet to install and get working. Import and export, those are from Solaredge, hence they say import SE for Solaredge and export SE. That information's from the Solaredge app. I'm using that rather than Myenergi because it's a little more accurate and it's showing it in watt hours for the amount of import and export. I could convert that to kilowatt hours. That's not too difficult to do either. Line below that, that's the Eddi, the Zappi as well, showing me how much energy I've been using on those devices from solar or the grid. That information is from the Myenergi integration. So it's all coming from different places, but all in one place, and I can see everything that's going on. The current power, how many kilowatt hours we've used for the day so far. I can track everything, and these nice little dials show you whether they're in the red or the green. But here's a good example of why it's really good to have the data in Home Assistant, not to use the original app. Here I've clicked on the Eddi grid kilowatt hours number that's at the bottom of the screen, the 4.18, and I can change the time frame that I'm looking at quite simply. So here I'm changing it to be 1st of February through to the end of February. And there's the data. Now the Myenergi app can't do that very quickly. You can see a day or a different day or a week or a month. But here in Home Assistant, I could look at any month. The database has years worth of information. I can see 2 days, 3 days. I can see whatever I want, and it's fast to respond. The Myenergi app doesn't do that. So this is where Home Assistant's really good. Once you've got the data, you can do better things with it. And it's all local as well with your own database. So it's very, very quick. So if we look a little further down the screen, we can see the Zappi and the Eddi devices set in eco and stopped mode. Well, the integration actually provides me with the ability to change them. So here I've clicked the Eddi device that says stopped. Now I can do the drop down and change it to normal. So I can change the modes, and this is faster than using the Myenergi app device as well. And it's all in one place. So by changing the mode of the Eddi, it should now, once it refreshes, start to use the Zappi power less and put more power towards the Eddi. So we should see that any moment, and there it goes. So less power through the Zappi, more power into the Eddi, 334, and that should keep ramping up. They're set to the same priority, so it should balance, I wouldn't say evenly, but it gives a good share between the two devices when they're set on the same priority. So it's really handy being able to change the modes as well from inside Home Assistant. I really do like that and use it a lot, much more than the Myenergi app. So I'll just put it back into stop mode because I want to charge the electric car, not heat our hot water today. Okay, that's done. We should now see that the Zappi should start to increase in more power. Yeah, 3 kilowatts, there we go, it's starting to increase. And the same for the Zappi as well. I can click on the Zappi device and change it from Eco Plus, stopped mode, or put it in fast. And again, that's really easy to do. I leave it in Eco most of the time. I find that works best with solar and a home storage battery. So next I have a row of buttons. So these are buttons that I can turn on or off, and they start with the -150W, -40W, 0, -10W. Those are watt differences for balancing to the grid. And then a whole row of DVCC and amp values. These are buttons that I can control the Victron charger and change how much I'm charging. So the button at the right hand side that's currently clicked on in yellow, that's 70 amps, so it'll charge at 70 times the 50 volts, 3.5 kilowatts. But if I want to put more energy to the Eddi and less into battery charging, I can change the amps of the Victron battery down to say 10 amps. 10 amps at 50 volts, that would be 500 watts. The value of those data buttons I've got displayed further down the screen, so if I just scroll down you can see V set point is 0 watts and the DVCC max amps is 70 amps. So I'll just go back again, scrolling up. Now if I click the 30-40 amp button, so that's now set to 40 amps for charging, and scroll back down, it should have changed it, and there you go, 40 amps, it's already changed it. So that's how quick and interactive it is configuring the Victron inverter via Home Assistant. You may have noticed as well while looking at those amp values that some of the other data I've got there is from Octopus and Octopus integration. It's showing me the number of kilowatt hours that I consumed from the grid yesterday and the cost of that yesterday. I keep track of that, but it also shows me the previous rate and the current rate. Those are the 30-minute segments, and tells me whether I'm in the cheap rate period, the off-peak period, or the peak rate, and I'm currently in the peak rate period. The idea of that, seeing the previous and the current, is when it swaps between the two and it changes the value, I could automate that and trigger a device to start using that cheaper rate energy. So having this information is really handy. So on to the next bit of data then. So we've got some temperature sensors. So you can see there the lounge, the hall, the bedroom, the garage and the loft, all with the temperatures and humidity. And the way that works is with a Sonos Zigbee bridge. So you can see that here in the picture, that's plugged into the USB port of the blue device that I have. And that communicates with Zigbee temperature and humidity sensors like this Sonos one here. And I've put it next to a key so you can see the size of it. They've just got a button battery in it. They're not wired, they're battery powered. They last for months and months. And as the temperature and humidity changes, it sends a signal over and then gets stored in Home Assistant. So if I scroll down further in my dashboard, what we can see here is I've put that temperature and humidity data into a chart and I can see it over time. So for here, I'm showing 3 days worth of data looking at the temperature and humidity sensors. This is where it's really useful. Transforming the data and looking at it instantaneously, but looking at it over time becomes really useful for tracking what's going on. Looking down my dashboard a little further, we've got some car information. So both the Mini and the Volkswagen e-Golf have APIs, and I can access the same information that's available on the apps as I can through Home Assistant. So these are great. So I can see the number of miles the car I've done, the mileage. The Volkswagen Golf even gives me the miles of the last trip and the last efficiency of the trip. I can see the state of charge of the battery, which is brilliant for the Golf because it doesn't display it in the damned car. So I really like having to see that in Home Assistant as well. I can see if the car's locked. I can see if it's charging or not. There's some great information there. And the great thing about having car data inside Home Assistant is rather than just seeing what the state of charge of the car is or how many miles the car has done so far, I can see the changes over time. So like this mini mileage chart in the middle, you can see a nice big rise in the graph in the middle of the month. I think that was the 14th of February when we took the car out and did 200 miles in it. So seeing the data over time in different sorts of graphs is really, really useful. So just scrolling down here to two graphs that are interesting side by side. The mini guessometer, the range that the mini is showing currently, and also the range that the Golf is showing. When you look at those over time, you can see that we're fully charging the cars, and the mini very rarely shows over 100 miles of range in winter. But the Golf, 120, 130, depending on the efficiency. It's not strictly an accurate comparison because the Mini is conservative and the Golf is quite accurate. So actually the Mini has a similar sort of range to the Golf. In fact, in winter, it might be even better because it's got that heat pump on it. I missed a line of information there, didn't I? Just above the car information, I've got some buttons that turn things on and off. These are my Casa smart switches and smart bulbs, so I can turn an outside light on, turn the bedroom dehumidifier on, the cloakroom, ensuite and bathroom radiators, I can turn those on. It's very handy having it all in one place, so if I notice we're exporting some energy, I can turn some extra electrical devices on. Scrolling down a little bit further, we've got some Myenergi information. There's the import today, very similar to the Solaredge import information, but I'm getting it from the Myenergi servers. This is really useful to see it inside Home Assistant, so I can see when I've been using energy and when I haven't over time, but also with the graph below, where did that energy go? Into the house, into the various devices, or into the Zappi or into the Eddi, so I can see what I'm doing over time. I do like that. A little bit further down, I've got two more charts from Myenergi. The solar watts, so that's all three arrays, how much solar we've got coming in. But then solar generated today, that's kilowatt hours, not kilowatts. So I can see over time how many kilowatt hours have we been having by day and what the peak was. Nice to see one over 30 kilowatt hours there. Scrolling down to the last chart there, solar W again, that's Myenergi data again, and the number of watts from all three solar arrays is exactly the same as the one that was above, but this time it's not looking at a single day, it's looking at an entire month or longer. And what's useful about that chart, I can see what the peak generation in a day is and whether it's changing. And you can see there towards the end of February, it's rising all the way to about 7.2 kilowatts. So it's nice to be able to track what's happening with solar, not just for a single day, but for a longer term trend. And I've done the same again with this Myenergi import today chart. Instead of looking at a single day, I'm looking at the entire month or more, and I can really see very clearly in here the difference that we've got in February. There's quite a few days where we've been self-sufficient and not drawing from the grid at all. So it's nice to see that trend, that the amount we're drawing from the grid is reducing from January to February, and then has stopped for quite a few days as well while we've been self-sufficient. Okay, moving on from Myenergi data, if I scroll down a little bit more, we start to get to where I'm monitoring the power usage of individual devices. So Home Assistant tracks individual devices, and I've got a selection here of things such as the oven and hob and the Toshiba aircon. Those are in the middle there. Those are from my Shelly power monitor. The Zappi and Eddi are from Myenergi, and pretty much the rest are from smart plugs, Casa smart plugs. So three different integrations, all the data being shown together, and over time I can see which devices are using how much power. You can see here the light green, the Zappi obviously uses more when it's charging, over 7 kilowatts, and then towards the end of the graph there you can see it rising as we get more solar energy and we're using more. But one of the things that you can do is you can deselect them. So if I click on each of the items, I can get rid of them all off the screen and have it just show one or two items. So I'm getting rid of everything now to just show the oven and hob and Toshiba aircon, just those from the Shelly monitor, and that's the Toshiba gone as well. So now I can see when we're using the oven and hob, and the scale automatically changes as well. So it's really useful for tracking things. If you want to look at an individual thing, you can track it. If you want to track two things together and see their relationship, you can see that on the graph. Or you can have everything showing all at once as well. One feature I use quite a lot is this time card showing the 26th or the 25th of February. I can select an individual day or a week or a month or a year, and I can change that. And once it changes this chart. So instead of seeing the data projected over a period of time and seeing a line graph, here I've got a Gantt chart, and it's basically counting up all the information over the time period, whether a day, whether a week or month or year. So I can see in order from what's using the most down to what's using the least over any of those time frames, and see the actual number. Showing here, Toshiba aircon energy for the month was 158 kilowatt hours. Further down the dashboard, I keep the information and charts I use less, so the most useful ones are at the top, the ones I use less frequently down the bottom. This one is all of the data that's shown from the Victron inverter, so these are all of the variables I'm able to monitor. If you look down the bottom, it's even got max cell voltage and minimum cell voltage, so I can see how good the spread of the voltages are. The reason for looking at that is in case I've got a bad cell, etc., or one that's deteriorating more than the others, I'll see a bigger variance. Anyway, there's lots of information there, lots of voltages, lots of power on the different lines in and lines out, etc. More information than I know what to do with. I said I'd show you how I get my Victron information using Modbus calls. Well, here it is, into File Editor, and there's a file called modbus.yaml. Now this looks really complicated because there's sort of coding in here, sensors and IP addresses and slave addresses and actual addresses of the individual items, but really this is just cut and paste off an internet page, and the slave is just the host number of my Victron inverter, so I can find that out from VRM, and the address, well again, it's just from a list telling me that address 262 is the battery temperature. The rest is just copy and paste and creating an individual name. It's not as complicated as it really seems. Quite recently though, there's a new integration available that provides the same information as this and probably a little bit more, but I haven't downloaded that and tried it yet, so I'm still doing it manually using Modbus calls. With all this great information that's stored inside Home Assistant, one of the things that you can do with it is create automations. So I've just gone into automations here and I'm looking at one that I've already created that works with mixed days and a counter. And what I'm basically doing is taking the data from Myenergi and looking at the cold water temperature, whether it's above 51 or whether it's below 52. So that's looking at the transition of, does it move above 51, from 51 or go above, or does it move from 52 and go below? And if it does that, then I know that we've had a water cleanse. So the tank has reached the maximum temperature or the minimum temperature that it needs to create that cleanse to get rid of the Legionella disease. It does that once every 14 days, but I want to know when it's going to do it and when it doesn't. So when it has done it, I reset a counter back to 0, and when it hasn't done it, I increment that counter every day, so I get to see how many days we've been without having done the cleanse, and then when we do the cleanse it resets it back to 0. Easy automation, just counting, and no coding either. This is just point and click. I'm only just getting started with automations at the moment. On this list we've got the Eddi 2 on. That's for when I forget to turn the Eddi on, if it's in stop mode, and if we're exporting some energy, then I turn the Eddi back into normal mode, so we absorb the solar energy and don't waste any. Export light, that's looking at the same sort of thing. If we've got lots of export going on, I turn a bulb on to 100% brightness to let me know that we're exporting. Mixed days, I've told you about those, and that leaves sunrise and sunset. I just changed the set point on the Victron inverter to be -1, so we export a little bit more during the day, then overnight it balances to 0. There's so much more that I could show you, but I just don't have time for, like this energy dashboard that's provided automatically by Home Assistant, showing me how much solar energy I've had and import from the day, and even a forecast, that little white line there showing a forecast of what solar energy it might be having, and a nice flow chart showing the flow of energy as well. So loads more that Home Assistant can do. I've just touched the surface. Thank you so much for watching this video. I hope it was useful. Hope you're interested and you have a think. Should I use Home Assistant or not? Hope you do. Hope you give it a go, because it is really useful and provides that overall view that all the other apps that we've got just can't provide. Take care. See you again soon for more videos. Bye for now.